All right, welcome everybody to our speaking session today. This next topic that we have is called transitioning from artificial intelligence to clinical intelligence. Today I am interviewing, I have the pleasure to introduce Imad Nijim. He's the CIO of vRad. vRad, as you might know, is one of the largest teleradiology practices in the US today. So if you'd like to introduce yourself and give us a little bit about your background, and I would like to ask you some questions about your experience with AI today.
Sure, sounds great. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm the CIO of vRad, and as part of my responsibilities, I'm also the chair of the AI committee. We put a lot of effort into managing AI and making sure that it's relevant to our business. Quite often we call it practical AI, or in this case, clinical AI. vRad has 500 radiologists, and we read about 6.5 million studies annually. So like you said, one of the biggest. And we were also one of the earliest adopters of AI technology. We started working on this about 6 years ago. It was very experimental at the time. It was new and exciting. Still is new and exciting, but a lot of progress has been made in the last 6 years.
That's, being one of the early adopters of AI, as you're known for, and as you said, can you tell us how you're leveraging the power, of AI to improve patient care?
Sure. One of the first things we did with AI before we got into image AI is we worked on the NLP aspect. We had to be able to understand our data, our reports in a very deep way as a starting point. Mm-hmm. Then once we had that figured out, we started working on worklist prioritization, and it was a good way to start because you can extract value from the technology very, very quickly because there was some tolerance for false positives. If you boost unnecessarily, no harm done. It had to be read anyways. So it was a great workflow to start with. And we put together a whole bunch of models, and over the years have refined the performance of these models and operationalized how we prioritize in the worklist to the point where we can use that to manage our turnaround time, especially turnaround time for life-threatening conditions.
Right.
And as you know, with vRad, a lot of our volume is emergent teleradiology. So the focus on life-threatening condition was key for us, and that's where we started.
Okay, interesting. One of the, the concerns that practices, like vRad that we talked to today are, in terms of trying to address physician satisfaction. Seems to be a pretty big hot button today, and also safeguarding against, medical legal malpractice claims. Right?
Yeah.
Can you comment on maybe how AI is kind of helping you tackle those endeavors today?
Yeah, for sure. Physician satisfaction is key. It's obviously an area that we've always been paying attention to. We love our RADs. We want them to be happy. We want them to practice at the top of their credentials with the least amount of distractions. And with that philosophy in mind, some of the first adoptions of AI were kind of behind the scenes. So worklist prioritization, there's not a lot of disruption. It works behind the scenes, and it prioritizes studies so the RADs don't feel that pressure, that queue pressure. They don't see the full list. They don't see flashing red lights. We manage the priority for them, and they just kind of go through the list methodically, and the system makes sure that the most critical cases are viewed first. So we've done a really good job, especially the summertime. We tend to have a surge of volume in the summer, but for those stroke, trauma, urgent cases, we maintain a very consistent turnaround time. A lot of tools go into that, but AI is a big part of it. So that was kind of my first question you asked. The second one was around Med Mile, and interesting you say that because really that's the next piece in that transition. We have a strategy called the funnel, and we kind of go from one rung to the next. As we get really good at one, we move and transition to the next one. And after worklist prioritization, the next workflow that we focused on was the quality aspect of the clinical quality aspect. Wow. We have the NLP, we have the image AI, you compare the results, and if there's a discrepancy, you send it to the quality committee.
Right.
So the idea there is to not only reduce med mal, which we've actually are able to measure that. There's tremendous impact to med mal by using AI, but also to provide a safety net. Radiologists, again, still in the background processing, but they feel like there's an extra safety net for these pathologies.
Okay. So you are quantifying med mal in terms of a version of those issues or those cases? Or?
We have, We've gone through an exercise where we pulled all our med mal expenses, including payouts or lawyer expense, and all the effort that went into it, and then measure that against what would the cost savings be if that was identified, and then compare that to the incident rate and the model performance. And we mushed all those together, and we came up with an actual dollar that was direct savings because of the use of AI.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Specifically with the use cases for AI today in stroke and for chest X-ray, can you kind of talk about how those are benefiting your practice, clinically as well as operationally?
Sure. Let me answer that with an example. This is an actual event that took place maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. And it just kind of articulates the value in a nice way. We had a patient, it came in, it was in Iowa, she was in Iowa. It was an elderly lady in a remote facility, a small hospital. And the images were sent, and as the images were sitting on the queue, the model identified the urgency and boosted in that list. And the doctor opened it. It was actually our chief of neuro. He was in his home in California, so hundreds of miles away.
Right.
And sure enough, it was one of those things where it wasn't subtle, it was obvious. Like no radiologist would have missed it. But the key here is that we're able to give it to the right doctor at the right time. And he was able to go, oh my God, I need to make a phone call. The system auto dials the phone number. And by the time the images were acquired, to the time our chief of neuro was on the line with the referring physician was 3 minutes between Iowa and California.
Right.
So a phenomenal example of, AI is a big part of it, but a whole bunch of technology working together to improve patient care. And we did some follow-up procedures, and sure enough, the quick impact, the outcome would have been big difference on the quality of her life.
Right.
Had it been 10 minutes or 12 minutes or 15 minutes. So these conditions where time is of the essence, and AI can look at it while sitting on the queue waiting to be read for by a human, the AI can look at it and prioritize it. That's a real life example of we potentially saved this person's life.
Interesting. My last question would be, and please, if anybody in the audience has questions, please ask. So, being one of the early adopters of AI and having the experience that you have, what are you seeing in the next 5 or 10 years that's going to happen with AI? Is it going to help transform practices, transform patient care? In what kind of ways do you see that happening?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we all try to look at a crystal ball and guess. Most of the AI technology is transitioning to finding a good fit from a business perspective. One of the challenges for the technology early on is that there wasn't a well-established ROI. But I think most people are now, Cure included, but the general industry is tuning into that issue and trying to understand a good product market fit. I'm starting to see that for the first time this year, I'll be honest with you.
Okay.
Before this year, it was much more focused on the technology. The business will come later. And I think over the next few years, some of those questions were going to get fleshed out, and those products will mature from that perspective.
Right.
I think we talked about quality quite a bit, so that will continue. The next thing I see as a big area is efficiency. Radiologists are battling large volumes on a regular basis. And anytime AI can help with eliminating mundane tasks or discrete measurements or quantification that normally would take a radiologist 10, 15, 30 seconds, and they do that 2-3 times an exam, and then they do that hundreds of times a day, that adds up, both from a repetitive fatigue, but also from efficiency of their reporting.
And physician satisfaction.
And satisfaction, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I can rattle off example after example, but you can imagine where we can take a volume bleed, take the volume, pre-populate the report,
right,
and the radiologist can confirm or agree, disagree, or they can do whatever they want with it, but it's there if they want it.
Yeah. All right. Good. Well, any other questions, please, from the audience? Yeah.
I had a question for you, Imad. The question is, can you give a couple of examples of high volume use cases where AI can have an impact? And still you see those are unsolved challenges.
Yeah, the question about high volume AI cases where there could be an impact. Honestly, there's a lot of cases where the incidence rate is small and the volume has to be big for it to make an impact. And it's one of those things where it's really easy to think about it as a percentage and go, well, that's a really low percent. It's not that big of a deal. But once it's your loved one, then it is a big deal. So I think any AI that can catch at any volume, 1 in a million, is valuable, right? So how do you take that and scale it? At vRad, because of our high volume, we see that. Maybe some smaller practices may not see it on a regular basis, but the value is still there, and you can extrapolate it into any volume. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Imad, thank you very much
Thank you,
for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.